The Portland rain hammered against the windshield of my 1967 Shelby GT500, each drop feeling like a personal insult. I sat in the parking lot of Henderson and Associates Luxury Auto Restoration, my knuckles white against the steering wheel, staring at the brick building that had just handed me a death sentence for my father's car. "Total engine failure," Marcus Henderson had said, his manicured hands gesturing dismissively at the paperwork. "The modifications we attempted were too aggressive for the original block. I'm afraid the damage is catastrophic. We can source a new engine, of course, but we're looking at $80,000 minimum." $80,000 I didn't have. Not after already spending $60,000 on their expert restoration over the past 8 months. The Shelby had been my father's pride and joy. Thomas Brennan had bought it in 1968 with his first real paycheck as a junior architect, back when a car like this was just a fast muscle car, not a 6-figure investment. He'd driven it to his wedding, brought me home from the hospital in it, taught me to drive in it. When he died 2 years ago, leaving me the car was his way of making sure a piece of him stayed with me. Now that piece was dying, killed by the same people who'd promised to make it better than new. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, past the names of friends who'd already heard me complain about this situation too many times. My thumb hovered over my sister Rebecca's number, but I couldn't bring myself to call her. She'd warned me about Henderson and Associates, said they were more interested in showroom pieces than soul, but their reputation was impeccable, their client list reading like a who's who of Portland's elite. The rain intensified, turning the world outside into a watercolor blur. Through it, I could barely make out the neon sign across the street. Riley's Automotive. All makes, all models. The letters flickered, the R occasionally dying before sputtering back to life. The shop looked like it had been there since the car was new, a squat cinder block building with a gravel lot and a chain-link fence that had seen better decades. I'd driven past it 100 times, never giving it a second glance. Why would I? When you own a Shelby GT500, you don't take it to a shop that works on Hondas and pickup trucks. But I was out of options. I fired up the engine. It coughed, sputtered, made a sound like a coffee grinder filled with marbles, and died. I tried again. Nothing. Henderson had been right about one thing. The engine was done. 45 minutes later, after calling a tow truck and burning through what little remained of my patience, I watched as my father's car was unceremoniously hauled onto a flatbed. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a coffee stain on his shirt, had listened to my abbreviated version of events with sympathetic nods. "Riley might be able to help," he'd said. "She's good, real good. Don't let the place fool you." Riley, a woman. Something about that detail irritated me, though I couldn't quite articulate why. Maybe it was the stress, or the money I'd already wasted, or the gut-wrenching feeling that I was watching my last connection to my father circle the drain. Whatever it was, I felt my jaw tighten as we pulled up to the shabby shop. The interior of Riley's Automotive smelled like motor oil, coffee, and rain-soaked concrete. The waiting area consisted of 4 plastic chairs, a coffee maker that looked older than I was, and a bulletin board covered in faded thank you cards and photos of cars in various states of repair. A radio played classic rock at low volume, Bruce Springsteen singing about glory days. Behind the counter stood a woman in her mid-30s, wiping her hands on a red shop rag. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, sharp green eyes, and grease smudged across her left cheekbone. She wore coveralls with Riley stitched across the breast pocket, and she looked up as I entered with an expression that was neither particularly welcoming nor hostile, just neutral, assessing. "Help you?" she asked. "Are you Riley?" "That's what the sign says. What can I do for you?" I glanced back through the window at my car on the flatbed. "I need someone to look at my Shelby. The engine's shot." She followed my gaze, and I saw something flicker in her expression. Interest, maybe. Or recognition. "That's a 67 GT500. You know your cars. It's kind of my job." She set down the rag and walked toward the door, pushing it open to get a better look. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. She stood there for a long moment, hands on her hips, studying the car with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Where'd you have it worked on?" "Henderson and Associates." She let out a low whistle. "And they killed it?" The bluntness of her assessment stung, even though it was true. "They said the engine modifications were too aggressive." "Modifications?" She shook her head slowly. "Did you ask for modifications?" "I asked for a restoration. They recommended upgrades, better performance, more reliability. And you trusted them." It wasn't a question, and the way she said it made me defensive. "They have an excellent reputation. They work on million-dollar cars." Riley turned to face me fully, and I saw something in her eyes that looked uncomfortably close to pity. Working on expensive cars doesn't mean they understand them. Especially cars like this. This isn't just a machine. It's got history, character. You can't just bolt on modern parts and expect it to work. It's like putting a human heart in a shark. Wrong tool for the wrong job. "So you're saying it can't be fixed?" "I'm saying Henderson probably shouldn't have touched it in the first place." She walked back inside, and I followed, irritation building in my chest. "Look, I didn't come here for commentary on my choices. Can you fix it or not?" She poured herself a cup of coffee from the ancient machine, didn't offer me one. "I'd need to look at it first. Really look at it. Pop the hood. See what they did. Assess the damage. How much? For the assessment, nothing. For the fix, depends on what I find." Henderson quoted me $80,000 for a new engine. Riley nearly choked on her coffee. $80,000. Jesus. "Yeah, if you want to go that route, sure. Or I could try to actually fix what's broken, instead of just replacing it with something expensive." Henderson said it was catastrophic damage. "Henderson says a lot of things." She set down her cup and grabbed a clipboard from behind the counter. "Look, Mr. Brennan, Daniel Brennan." "Mr. Brennan, I get it. You're stressed, you're angry, you've already spent a fortune, and now you're standing in a shop that looks like it should have been condemned in 1985, talking to a mechanic who's probably not what you expected. You're wondering if this is going to be another expensive mistake." She wasn't wrong, and I hated that she could read me so easily. "But here's the thing," she continued. "I've been working on cars since I was 8 years old. My dad owned this shop before me, and his dad owned it before him. I've seen every kind of engine failure, every botched restoration, every hack job dressed up as expert work. And I'm telling you, sight unseen, that Henderson probably did exactly what shops like that always do. They treated your car like a blank check instead of a living piece of history." "You sound pretty confident for someone who hasn't even looked under the hood." "Because I've seen this story before. Probably a dozen times." She tapped her pen against the clipboard. "So here's my offer. Let me assess it, no charge. If I can't fix it, or if it really is as bad as Henderson says, I'll tell you straight. No BS, no upselling. But if I can save it, I will. And it'll cost a hell of a lot less than 80 grand. I wanted to argue, to tell her I didn't need charity or speeches about history and soul. I wanted to walk out, find another high-end shop, get a second opinion from someone in a cleaner building with newer equipment. But the truth was, I was tired. Tired of being disappointed, tired of watching my father's legacy slip away, tired of feeling helpless. "Fine," I said, "look at it. I'll need a couple days." "A couple days? I have other customers, Mr. Brennan. Despite what this place looks like, I stay pretty busy. This is urgent. It's a dead engine. It's not getting any deader." She softened slightly, seeing the desperation I was trying to hide. "Look, I'll try to get to it tomorrow. I'll call you when I know something." I gave her my number and walked back out into the rain, which had picked up again. As the tow truck driver unloaded the Shelby into one of Riley's bays, I stood there watching, feeling like I was abandoning my father all over again. The next 30 hours were torture. I tried to work, staring at architectural plans for a new mixed-use development downtown, but the lines kept blurring together. My apartment felt claustrophobic, every wall covered with photos of my dad and that damn car. Him washing it on Saturday mornings, Him behind the wheel at my high school graduation. Him polishing the chrome a week before the stroke that killed him. I'd promised him I'd take care of it. Those were literally his last coherent words. Take care of my girl, Danny. She's got soul. When my phone finally rang at 2 in the afternoon the next day, I nearly dropped it answering. Mr. Brennan, it's Riley. I've got some news about your car. My stomach dropped. And? Can you come down to the shop? This is better explained in person. Just tell me, can you fix it or not? There was a pause, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then, yeah, I can fix it. But you're not going to like what I have to say about how it got this way. 20 minutes later, I was standing in Riley's shop, looking down at the exposed engine of my father's Shelby. It looked like someone had performed surgery on it and then abandoned the operation halfway through. Wires hung loose, parts were disconnected, and in the center of it all was a crack running through the engine block that even I could see was bad. Riley stood beside me, arms crossed, her expression grim. Henderson did this, she said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. These modifications, they're not just aggressive, they're incompetent. They tried to install a modern fuel injection system on a block that was never designed for it. The pressure differentials alone would have been enough to cause problems, but they also replaced your original camshaft with something completely inappropriate for this engine's compression ratio. English, please. They didn't understand what they were working on, so they forced modern solutions onto a classic problem. And when it didn't work, they just kept forcing, until something gave. She pointed at the crack. That's not catastrophic, that's fixable, but it requires someone who actually understands how these engines work. You can weld it? Not weld. You can't just weld an engine block, at least not like this, but there's a process, a specialized repair technique. It's labor-intensive, requires precision, but yeah, I can fix this. Relief flooded through me, so intense I had to steady myself against the workbench. How much? Parts and labor? Maybe 12,000. Could be less if I can source some used components that are still in good shape. 12,000. Compared to 80, it sounded like a miracle. But here's the thing, Riley continued, her voice taking on a harder edge. Henderson should have never let it get this bad. A competent mechanic would have caught these problems before the engine failed. They had this car for 8 months. 8 months, and they never noticed they were killing it. Can you prove that? That they screwed up, I mean. I can document everything I find, take photos, write up a detailed report. Whether that helps you legally, I don't know. But yeah, this is malpractice, automotive malpractice. I felt anger building, hot and righteous. $60,000, 8 months of waiting, all because I'd trusted a name and a reputation instead of, what, my gut, dumb luck. Start the repairs, I said, and document everything. Riley nodded. It'll take about 3 weeks, maybe 4. This isn't something I can rush. I understand. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Mr. Brennan. Yeah? This car meant something to someone. I can see it in how it was maintained before Henderson got their hands on it. Original parts, careful upkeep, love. Whoever took care of this before, they knew what they were doing. My father, I said quietly. He bought it new in '68, drove it until he died 2 years ago. Riley's expression softened. Then let me bring it back. Not just fix it. Bring it back to what he knew, what he loved. No modifications, no upgrades, just restoration, real restoration. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and walked out into the overcast Portland afternoon. I should have felt relieved. The car could be saved, and for a fraction of what Henderson had quoted. But instead, I felt something else. Guilt, for the things I'd thought about Riley's shop when I first arrived, for the way I'd doubted her, for bringing my prejudice and desperation into her workspace and expecting her to make it right. She hadn't asked for my judgment, she'd just offered to help, and I'd been an asshole about it. The thought followed me home, settled into my chest like a stone. I kept remembering the look in her eyes when she'd seen the damage Henderson had done. Not triumph at catching another shop's mistake, Not satisfaction at getting a big job, just quiet sadness, like she was looking at something precious that had been needlessly hurt. 3 weeks, she'd said, maybe 4. It was going to be a long wait. The email from Henderson and Associates arrived 4 days after I'd dropped the car at Riley's. Professional, apologetic, and utterly useless. Dear Mr. Brennan, we understand your frustration regarding the unfortunate outcome of your vehicle's restoration. However, after consulting with our senior technicians, we maintain that the engine failure was due to inherent weaknesses in the original manufacturing, exacerbated by decades of use. The modifications we performed were industry standard and appropriate for a vehicle of this vintage. We stand by our original assessment that a complete engine replacement is the only viable solution. As a gesture of goodwill, we'd be willing to reduce our fee to $75,000. I read it twice, then a third time, feeling my blood pressure rise with each word. Inherent weaknesses, decades of use, industry standard. Every phrase was carefully chosen to deflect blame, to make it sound like my father had somehow driven the car wrong for 50 years. I forwarded the email to Riley with a short message. This is what I'm dealing with. Her response came back in under 5 minutes. Typical. Come by Thursday afternoon if you can. Want to show you something. Thursday morning, I woke up to rain again. Portland in November was basically 50 shades of grey, each day bleeding into the next in a monotony of drizzle and damp. I spent the morning finishing up drawings for a client's home renovation, a mid-century modern that needed updating without losing its character. The irony wasn't lost on me. At 2:30, I pulled into Riley's parking lot. The gravel crunched under my tires, puddles reflecting the perpetually overcast sky. Inside, the shop smelled the same as before: oil, metal, and that particular scent of old coffee that might actually be a fundamental element of automotive repair. Riley was at the workbench, bent over what looked like a piece of engine component, studying it with a jeweler's loupe. She glanced up as I entered. "Brennan, good timing." She set down the loupe and gestured for me to follow her into the main bay. The Shelby sat in the center of the workspace, hood open, surrounded by tools and parts arranged with almost surgical precision. But what caught my attention was the wall behind it. Riley had set up a large whiteboard covered in photographs, diagrams, and notes connected by red marker lines, like some kind of automotive murder board. "Welcome to the autopsy," she said, walking over to the board. "Thought you might want to see exactly what Henderson did to your car." She pointed to the first series of photos, close-ups of engine components with sections circled in red. Original carburetor, completely functional. Henderson removed it and installed a fuel injection system. She tapped another photo. "Here's where they mounted it. See these stress marks? The mounting points weren't designed for this kind of hardware. They had to drill new holes, which weakened the block's structural integrity." I leaned closer, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Why would they do that? Because fuel injection sounds modern and high performance. They could charge more for it. Plus, it fits their narrative that they're upgrading classic cars. She moved to the next set of images. But here's where it gets worse. Your original camshaft was a factory-spec piece, matched to this engine's compression ratio and timing. Henderson replaced it with a high-performance cam designed for racing applications. And that's bad. It's catastrophic. Racing cams are designed for engines that are going to be rebuilt frequently, run hard, and maintained constantly. They create massive stress on engine components. Your dad's car wasn't built for that. It was built to be driven, enjoyed, maintained, but not pushed to racing limits. She pulled out another photo, this one showing the crack in the engine block. This is where it all came together. Increased fuel pressure from the injection system, increased stress from the inappropriate camshaft, weakened structural integrity from the mounting modifications. The block literally couldn't handle what they did to it. I felt sick. They had to know this would happen. Riley shrugged. Honestly, I don't think they did. And that's almost worse. A competent shop would have seen these problems coming. They would have either refused the modifications or engineered solutions that actually worked. Henderson just threw expensive parts at your car and hoped for the best. So, what does this mean for the repair? She walked over to a parts shelf and picked up what looked like a metal cylinder. This is a porosity repair sleeve. It's a specialized insert that reinforces the damaged section of the block. I'll machine out the crack, install the sleeve, and then rebuild the entire engine using original spec components. No fuel injection, no racing cam, no Henderson special touches, just a proper restoration. How did you learn to do this? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She set down the sleeve and was quiet for a moment, her expression distant. My grandfather started this shop in 1962. He was a mechanic in the army, came home after Korea, and opened up Riley's. Back then, cars were simpler, but they still had souls. He taught my dad everything, and my dad taught me. I grew up in this shop, spent more time under hoods than in school. She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. Dad died 6 years ago, pancreatic cancer. I inherited the shop, the debt, and a reputation for being the person you come to when everyone else has failed. That's a lot of responsibility. It's a legacy, same as your car. She gestured at the Shelby. Your dad maintained this beauty for decades. That takes dedication, knowledge, and love. Every original part on this car, every careful repair, every time he chose to fix instead of replace, that's a legacy too. Henderson didn't see that. They saw a paycheck. I walked over to the car, running my hand along the fender. The paint was original, faded in spots but authentic. He used to take me for drives on Sunday mornings. We'd go out to the gorge, stop for breakfast at this diner in Troutdale. He'd tell me stories about building designs he was working on, problems he was trying to solve. I swallowed hard. After Mom left, those drives were the only time he seemed really happy. Riley nodded slowly. Then this car isn't just a machine. It's a memory container, and Henderson tried to erase those memories by making it into something it never was. Can you really fix this? Not just make it run, but make it right. That's the only way I know how to fix things. Over the next 2 weeks, I found myself stopping by the shop more often than necessary. At first, I told myself it was about checking on the progress, making sure Riley was doing what she'd promised. But that was bullshit, and I knew it. The truth was, I was fascinated by watching her work. Riley approached the repair like an archaeologist doing a restoration, carefully documenting every step, researching original specifications, even tracking down period-correct replacement parts from a network of suppliers and enthusiasts around the country. She'd spend hours on the phone, talking to other mechanics, collectors, even a retired Ford engineer who'd worked on the original Shelby line. There's a guy in Michigan who has 3 of these in various states of disassembly, she told me one afternoon, holding up her phone. He's sending me photos of his carburetor setup so I can make sure everything's correct. No charge, just happy to help save another one. Another one? Apparently Henderson has a bit of a reputation in the classic car community. This isn't the first restoration they've botched. She scrolled through her phone, showing me forum posts and message board threads. There's a whole network of people who've been burned by high-end shops that don't actually understand classic cars. They treat it like working on a modern vehicle, just with older parts. But it's not. It's a completely different philosophy. What's the difference? She set down her phone and looked at me like a teacher who'd just been asked a particularly good question. Modern cars are designed to be disposable, not literally, but philosophically. When something breaks, you replace the whole unit. Modules, computers, systems. It's efficient, it's fast, but it's soulless. Classic cars were built when mechanics actually fixed things. You'd rebuild a carburetor, not replace it. You'd resurface a cylinder head, not swap in a new one. It took more skill, more knowledge, but the result was a car you could maintain forever if you wanted to. My dad would have liked you. The words came out before I could stop them, and I immediately felt awkward. But Riley just smiled, not mockingly, but genuinely. I would have liked him too. Anyone who keeps a car running for 50 years has my respect. She went back to work, and I watched as she carefully installed the porosity sleeve into the engine block, her movements precise and confident. There was something meditative about it, the way she'd check and recheck measurements, test fit components, make minute adjustments. No rushing, no shortcuts. "Can I ask you something?" I said after a while. "Shoot. Why do you do this? The shop can't be making you rich, and you could probably work anywhere you wanted with your skills." Riley set down her torque wrench and straightened up, wiping her hands on a rag. "You ever hear the story about the Japanese tradition of kintsugi? The gold repair thing, for pottery. Right. When a ceramic piece breaks, instead of throwing it away or trying to hide the damage, they repair it with lacquer mixed with gold. The cracks become part of the piece's history, its beauty. They don't see damage as something to erase. They see it as something that adds character." She gestured at the shop around us. "That's what I do. I take broken things, things other people have given up on, and I make them whole again. Not by erasing their history, but by respecting it." That's a pretty philosophy. It's also good business. People remember when you actually fix their problems instead of just taking their money. Is that a dig at me? She grinned. "Only if you think you deserve it." The call came on a Friday afternoon, 3 weeks and 4 days after I'd first dropped the Shelby at Riley's shop. I was in my office, staring at elevations for a restaurant renovation, when my phone buzzed. "It's done." 2 words, simple, direct, and they made my heart skip. "The car? Come see for yourself." Riley's voice carried something I'd never heard from her before. Pride, maybe, or joy. "I'll be here till 7. I left work immediately, barely remembering to grab my jacket. The drive to Riley's shop took 15 minutes that felt like hours. Portland's evening traffic crawled along Burnside, brake lights reflecting off wet pavement, and I found myself drumming my fingers on the steering wheel with barely contained anticipation. The shop's lights were on when I arrived, and I could see the Shelby through the bay window, hood closed, parked in the center of the workspace. Even from outside, it looked different. Not flashy or modified, but right, authentic. Riley met me at the door, a rare smile on her grease-smudged face. "Ready? Is that even a question?" She led me inside, and I stopped, just staring. The car was perfect, not showroom perfect, not restored to better than new perfect, just honest. The paint still showed its age. The chrome had the patina of 5 decades. The interior leather bore the wear patterns of countless drives, but the engine, visible now through the opened hood, gleamed with careful restoration. "Every component is period correct," Riley said, walking me through the work. "Original spec carburetor, factory camshaft, all genuine Ford parts or NOS, new old stock components from the original manufacturing era. The block is reinforced, but using techniques that would have been available in the 60s. Even the hoses and clamps are authentic to the period." She reached in and tapped the valve cover, painted in that specific shade of Ford blue. "This is exactly what your dad saw when he popped the hood in 1968. Can I start it? That's why I called you." She handed me the keys, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Go ahead." I slid into the driver's seat, the old leather familiar under my hands. How many times had I sat here next to my dad, watching him drive, listening to him talk about architecture and cars and life? How many Sunday mornings had started with this exact moment, the turn of the key, the rumble of the engine? I turned the key. The engine caught immediately, settling into a smooth, powerful idle that sent vibrations through the chassis. Not the rough, uncertain sound it had made before Henderson, not the modified roar they'd tried to create. This was the original voice of the car, the exact sound my father had heard for 50 years. I sat there, hands on the wheel, listening. Tears were running down my face before I even realized I was crying. Riley leaned in through the passenger window. "Take it for a drive. I adjusted the timing, set the carburetor mixture, but it needs a few miles to really settle in. Come with me." She looked surprised. You sure? I'm sure. She climbed into the passenger seat, and I backed the Shelby out of the shop and onto the street. The rain had stopped, leaving the city wet and shining under streetlights. I drove carefully at first, getting used to the feel of the car again, but gradually my confidence returned. This was how it was supposed to feel, responsive but not twitchy, powerful but controlled, a machine that worked with you rather than against you. Every shift was smooth, every acceleration predictable, every corner balanced. This was what my father had known, what he'd loved. Where to? Riley asked. The Gorge. There's a diner in Troutdale. We drove east on I-84, the Columbia River Gorge opening up around us as we left the city behind. The Shelby ran perfectly, engine humming with the kind of mechanical confidence that comes from proper engineering and careful maintenance. No warning lights, no strange sounds, no doubts. Just a car doing exactly what it was designed to do. Riley didn't say much during the drive, just watched the passing scenery and occasionally smiled. I realized I liked having her there, liked sharing this moment with someone who understood what it meant. The diner hadn't changed much since my childhood. Same red vinyl booths, same black and white checkered floor, same smell of coffee and bacon that seemed permanently baked into the walls. We slid into a booth by the window, the Shelby visible in the parking lot. This place is perfect, Riley said, looking around, like a time capsule. My dad and I used to come here every Sunday. He'd get the Denver omelette. I'd get chocolate chip pancakes, even though Mom said I had too much sugar in my diet. The memory was sharp, almost painful. Last time we came here was about a month before he died. He couldn't drive anymore by then, so I drove. He kept giving me directions I didn't need, pointing out landmarks I'd seen 100 times. I was annoyed with him. You couldn't have known. No. But I should have been more patient. I looked out at the car. He made me promise to take care of it. His last coherent words, take care of my girl Danny, she's got soul. I thought he was being sentimental, you know, old man stuff. He was being wise. That car isn't just metal and mechanics, it's memory, history, connection. She paused. You did take care of it. You fought for it when it would have been easier to just let it go. After paying Henderson to destroy it. After trusting the wrong people because you didn't know better. That's not failure, that's learning. The waitress came by, an older woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Dottie. We ordered coffee and pie, the kind of comfort food that tastes better in a place like this than it ever does anywhere else. Can I ask you something? Riley said after Dottie left. Sure. Why architecture? What made you choose that? My dad, actually. He'd take me to buildings he was working on, show me the plans, explain how structures worked. I loved the idea that you could imagine something and then make it real, that you could create spaces where people lived their lives. I smiled. He used to say architecture was frozen music, that good design had rhythm, harmony, purpose. He sounds like someone I would have liked. He would have loved you, would have spent hours talking to you about the car, about restoration philosophy, probably would have offered you a job designing a garage. The thought made me laugh. He was like that, always trying to connect people who shared his passions. You miss him. Every day, but especially in moments like this. I gestured at the diner, the car outside. This was our thing, our Sunday ritual. Without him here, it feels incomplete. Maybe, Riley said carefully, it's not about completion. Maybe it's about continuation. You're here, driving his car the way he drove it, remembering him, honoring what he loved. That's not incomplete. That's legacy. The pie arrived, warm and perfect, and we ate in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, the Shelby sat under a parking lot light, looking exactly like it had in my childhood memories. Not perfect, not modified, just authentic. What are you going to do about Henderson? Riley asked eventually. I don't know. Part of me wants to destroy him, expose the counterfeit parts, make sure everyone knows what his shop did. But another part just wants to move on, enjoy the car, let it go. Both are valid choices. What would you do? She considered this, sipping her coffee. I'd document everything and hold on to it. Maybe he learns from this, maybe he doesn't. But if he does it to someone else, you'll have evidence to help them. That's probably more useful than public revenge. That's very mature of you. I've been through this before, remember? Had my share of dealing with shops that prioritize profit over craft. Burning bridges feels good in the moment, but it doesn't actually fix anything. She smiled. Building better bridges, though, that lasts. We finished our pie and coffee, paid Dottie, and headed back to the car. The night was clear now, stars visible between the clouds, and the air smelled like rain and pine. I stood by the driver's door for a moment, looking at the Shelby. "Thank you," I said to Riley, "for everything, for saving the car, for teaching me, for being patient with me when I was an ass. You weren't that much of an ass." "I was. We both know it." She laughed. "Okay, yeah, you were kind of an ass, but you got better." She walked around to the passenger side. "Come on, drive us back. I want to hear how it sounds at highway speed." The drive back to Portland was perfect. The Shelby ran flawlessly, the engine singing its original song, the transmission shifting smoothly through gears worn in by 5 decades of use. This was how it was supposed to be, how my father had known it, how it would continue if I took care of it properly. When we pulled into Riley's shop, I was almost reluctant to turn off the engine. Almost. "Send me the final bill," I said as we got out. "Already did. Check your email." I pulled out my phone and found her invoice. $12,347. Parts, labor, documentation, all itemized with the kind of detail that would have made my accountant weep with joy. "This seems low." "That's the actual cost. I don't inflate prices just because I can." She leaned against her workbench. "Besides, this one was personal. Your dad took care of this car for 50 years. The least I could do was bring it back right. I'll pay you double. You'll pay what I invoiced and be happy about it." "Riley, Daniel." She fixed me with that steady green gaze that had become familiar over the past weeks. "Accept the kindness. Let someone help you without turning it into a transaction." She was right, as usual. I transferred the payment and then just stood there, not quite ready to leave. "What are you going to do now?" Riley asked. "Drive it, I guess. Take care of it the way Dad would have wanted. Maybe bring it by for regular maintenance." "I'd like that." She paused. "And maybe sometimes we could grab coffee or dinner without the pretense of car talk." I felt something shift in my chest, a kind of nervous excitement I hadn't felt in years. Like a date. Like two people who discovered they enjoy each other's company. Call it whatever you want. "I'd like that too." She smiled, and I realized I'd been wanting to see that smile more often. "Good. Now get out of here before I find something else that needs adjusting." I drove home slowly, savoring every mile, every sound, every sensation. The car felt alive in a way it hadn't since my father died, like it had been sleeping and was now finally awake again. When I pulled into my apartment's garage, I sat in the car for a long time just listening to the engine idle. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Heard the car's done. How is it?" I took a photo of the dashboard, the original gauges glowing soft amber in the darkness, and sent it to her with a message. "Perfect. Exactly like Dad's." Her response came immediately. "He'd be proud of you." Maybe, or maybe he'd be proud of Riley, for seeing value where others saw only problems, for respecting history when it would have been easier to erase it, for having the skill and patience to make things right. Either way, the car was home, and for the first time since my father died, that word felt complete again. The lawsuit from Henderson and Associates arrived 2 weeks later, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic about the whole thing. 20 pages of legal language essentially saying I'd breached my contract, damaged their reputation, and owed them not only the $60,000 I'd already paid, but an additional $40,000 in damages. I called the lawyer Riley had recommended, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in automotive disputes. She read through the lawsuit while I sat in her office, watching the Portland rain through floor-to-ceiling windows. "This is bullshit," she said finally. "They have no case. You didn't breach the contract. They failed to perform competent work. And the counterfeit parts issue?" She smiled. "That's our nuclear option. They don't want that going public. So what do? We respond with our own filing. Fraud, breach of contract, negligent misrepresentation. We document the counterfeit parts. We bring in expert testimony. We make this so messy that Henderson will beg to settle." She set down the papers. "But here's the question. What do you actually want?" "I want my money back. Realistically, you'll get some of it. Maybe half, maybe more, depending on how scared they get. But full restitution? Unlikely. So is that enough? Or do you want blood?" I thought about my father, about the way he'd always preferred finding solutions over creating problems, about Riley's advice to document everything but focus on building better bridges. I want them to admit they screwed up, even if it's just to me, even if it's just in the settlement agreement. I want them to acknowledge that they didn't know what they were doing, and they should have been honest about that from the start. Patricia nodded approvingly. "That I can work with." The settlement took 3 months to negotiate. Henderson fought, threatened, blustered, but ultimately the evidence was too damning. The counterfeit parts alone would have destroyed his reputation if it went public, and Patricia made sure he knew we had serial numbers, manufacturer statements, and expert analysis. In the end, I got $42,000 back, plus a written acknowledgement that Henderson and Associates had failed to meet the standards expected for restoration of a vehicle of this caliber and historical significance. Not quite an admission of fault, but close enough. The money helped. I used some of it to pay Riley a bonus she refused 3 times before I finally just deposited it directly into her business account. The rest went into a savings account marked Shelby Maintenance, because I'd learned my lesson about cutting corners on important things. But the real victory was smaller, quieter. It was taking the Shelby for Sunday drives through the gorge, sometimes alone with my memories, sometimes with Riley beside me. It was joining a classic car club where people actually understood what preservation meant. It was learning to do basic maintenance myself, guided by Riley's patient instruction and my father's old shop manual. It was letting go of the anger and embracing the joy. 6 months after getting the car back, I took Rebecca for a drive. She'd been skeptical about the whole thing, worried I was throwing good money after bad, concerned that I was too attached to a material object. But when she settled into the passenger seat and I started the engine, I saw her expression change. "This sounds exactly like I remember," she said quietly. "Riley restored it to factory spec. Everything's original or period correct." We drove through Portland's West Hills, taking the winding roads Dad used to love, and Rebecca was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, "I'm sorry I doubted you. About Riley, about fighting Henderson, about all of it. You did the right thing. I got lucky. If I hadn't found Riley, but you did. And you recognized what she could do, even when it wasn't obvious. That's not luck, that's growth. She wasn't wrong. The me from 6 months ago would have never trusted Riley's shop, would have probably paid Henderson whatever he wanted just to avoid conflict. But something had changed, some fundamental shift in how I approached problems and people. "You're different," Rebecca said, as if reading my mind. "Calmer, more confident. I learned what real expertise looks like, and what matters versus what just seems impressive." We stopped at that diner in Troutdale, ordered the same meals Dad and I used to get, sat in a booth by the window where the Shelby was visible in the parking lot. Rebecca pulled out her phone and took a photo of the car. "For your kids?" I asked. "For Dad, for all of us?" She looked at the photo, then at me. "This is his legacy, you know. Not just the car, but this. You fighting to preserve something meaningful, learning to value substance over appearance, building relationships with people who share your values. That's what he would have wanted." I felt tears threatening, but fought them back. I wish he could have met Riley. "Tell me about her." So I did. About her family's shop, her philosophy of restoration, her patience and skill. about how she'd seen value in something others had written off, how she'd taken the time to do things right, even when cutting corners would have been easier and more profitable. "You love her," Rebecca said. What? "No, we're just friends." "Daniel, I'm your sister. I know you, and I haven't heard you talk about anyone like this since—" She paused. "Actually, I don't think I've ever heard you talk about anyone like this. It's complicated." "It's only complicated if you make it complicated." She finished her coffee. "She sounds amazing. Don't be an idiot and let her slip away because you're too scared to be honest about how you feel." I drove Rebecca back to her house in the suburbs, her words echoing in my head. Love was a strong word, maybe too strong, but care, respect, admiration, those I couldn't deny. Riley had become important to me, not just as the mechanic who'd saved my father's car, but as a person I wanted in my life. The question was whether she felt the same way. I called her that evening, heart pounding like I was 16 again. "Hey, are you busy?" "Watching bad TV and eating leftover Chinese food." "So yes, very busy. What's up? Want to go for a drive tomorrow?" "Not to the shop, not about the car, just a drive." There was a pause. "Like a date drive?" "Yeah, if you're interested." "About time you asked properly." I could hear the smile in her voice. "Pick me up at 10. I took her up the coast, Highway 101 winding along the Oregon shoreline, waves crashing against rocks, the Shelby purring contentedly as miles disappeared beneath us. We stopped at a beach near Cannon Rock, walked along the sand, talked about everything and nothing. "I need to tell you something," I said finally, standing at the edge of the surf. "I was an asshole when we met. Judgmental, dismissive, treating you like you couldn't possibly understand what I needed. And you proved me wrong in every possible way. I know. You know? Daniel, you weren't subtle. You walked into my shop looking like you'd rather be anywhere else, talking to anyone else. But you also came back, kept coming back, actually learned and grew. That matters more than where you started. I regret everything I said to you that first day, everything I thought about your shop, about your abilities, about you." Riley smiled, pushing wind-blown hair out of her face. "Good. Regret means you learned something. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Not judge people by appearances, not assume expensive means better. Actually listen to experts instead of just hearing what I want to hear." I took her hand, surprised by my own boldness. "And tell you that you saved more than just my father's car. You saved my connection to him, my faith that good people still exist, and maybe me a little bit. That's a lot of responsibility to put on one mechanic. You're not just one mechanic, you're Riley." She laughed, the sound mixing with the crash of waves. "Smooth, Brennan, very smooth. I mean it. I know you do. That's what makes it sweet instead of cheesy." She squeezed my hand. "Come on, let's get back before the tide comes in." We drove back to Portland as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost too perfect to be real. The Shelby ran flawlessly, just as it would for years to come if I took care of it properly. And I would, because I'd learned what care meant, what preservation required, what it took to honor the past while moving forward into the future. All thanks to a mechanic in a shabby shop who'd seen value where others saw only problems, who'd had the skill and patience to make things right, who taught me that real expertise doesn't announce itself with fancy buildings and high prices. It just shows up, does the work, and changes everything.